I feel like women are always screaming for help on the inside, but nobody hears them because it comes out as a whisper. So my goal in life is to empower as many women as I can to really use their voice so they can get connected to the truth of who they are and create a life that they desire that's filled with joy, peace, and freedom.
Welcome to A Sista's Love, the podcast that helps women who are healing by having those deep conversations, giving practical advice and words of encouragement. Come on, let's talk about it. Hello, my beautiful sisters. On today's episode of A Sista's Love podcast, we'll be having a guest, and her name is Isabel. And she discussed her journey of healing from the term a strong Black woman, how she realized that society's definition of a strong Black woman is actually meant to weaken us. So join us as we redefine the term of a strong Black woman. But before we get started, I want to introduce myself to my first time listener. I am Rose Jones, and I'm your host here at A Sista's Love podcast. And I am just a woman who is trying to inspire other women through my story of being a survivor of domestic violence, battling PTSD, and self-hate. And I'm just trying to keep it as real as possible and be honest about the struggles that I'm facing in my life. And my goal for this podcast is to have a safe healing place for women who are going through some of the similar things. So if you are looking for a place to heal, then you are in the right place. I would love for you to join our family. All you have to do is hit the subscribe button, turn on your notifications, so that you will never miss another episode of A Sista's Love podcast. Today we have a beautiful guest. Her name is Isabel. Isabel, can you introduce yourself to the listeners, please?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, first of all, for having me on your show. I appreciate it. My name is Isabel Drawn. I'm a life transformational and spiritual coach, author, and international speaker. I work with women, professional women, entrepreneur women, just women in general, really, who have lost identity within themselves. I guess in so many ways that I put it is that I help women align with their soul's purpose. And I'm an entrepreneur for over 2 decades. I'm also a co-founder of Visix Design Studios that my husband and I run together as a construction company. My passion really is being able to empower women to find their voice. The name of my business is called Loud Whisper. And I called it Loud Whisper because I feel like women are always screaming for help on the inside, but nobody hears them because it comes out as a whisper. So my goal in life is to empower as many women as I can to really use their voice so they can get connected to the truth of who they are and create a life that they desire that's filled with joy, peace, and freedom. And it's on their terms.
Oh, that is beautiful. What got you started in this, wanting to do this? Like, what was this fire that sparked it?
You know, if I can be honest, I've always had a yearning, I think because of my life experiences, but I didn't know exactly what it was back then. And growing up, I always found myself really, most of the people that are surrounded myself were older than me, and they're always asking me for advice and just my life in general. But really what fanned my flame and really sparked it to get to the point where now I said, okay, this is really what I'm going to do. First of all, I always, despite me having a family, of course, I'm married and I have children, really blessed to have that. And as I mentioned, I've been in business for 2 decades. So I'm running our construction business, and everything seemed great and it looked great, right? But each night when I'd go to bed at night, I found myself gazing in the ceiling and asking myself, like, this has to be more to life than this. And this happened night after night, night after night. Now, from the outside looking in, somebody would say, wow, how could you feel that way? Because your life looks so amazing. Family, wife, business owner. My life was great. But even as your life is great, it's your purpose, right? What makes you feel fulfilled? I didn't feel any fulfillment. And to be honest, I lived a life where, because of my past experience, which we're about to discuss here with what your show has, I lived my life outside of myself because I experienced a lot of shame. And because of all the life experiences that I went through, so I went through a lot of shame. And I got to a point where my soul was heavy. So I knew that there had to be more to this. And each night I could tell that God is like, I have a purpose and I have a calling for you. I was just yearning for something else. And the thing that I love about this, as crazy as it may seem, is that I myself was in a space of brokenness. So in order for me to be able to speak and help other women, I had to work on my own brokenness. So I got to a point where I got tired of being tired from the brokenness that I was feeling inside. And that's when I said, I have to do something to get myself better. And it's through that journey, it's through that awakening that just my purpose grew. And I said, you know what? I need to help women empower their voice, to be able to use their voice. And if I could just give you a snippet, I'm originally from Tanzania and Zambia, and I grew around very courageous. When I tell you courageous, powerful women, and these women, when they were business owners, moms, professional women, and I would watch them, even the women carrying tomatoes on their head. To me, they were entrepreneurs. They just didn't own a Rockefeller building. But for years, I would watch these women just have so much resilience and tenacity, go out there and do it all for their families and take care of their families. But what I didn't know then as a child is when I came to realize when I grew up, and I started living the life of starting to be a woman and experiencing what I was going through, was that those women were so strong, powerful, and courageous, but they didn't have a voice, right? So everything that they did in their life, it was about everybody else but themselves. And I found myself living that life. I found myself living a life of survival. And that's when God said, no, I didn't create you to survive. I created you to thrive.
Amen.
And that's when my journey started. Yeah.
I totally agree with that. I see a lot of women moving through life in survival mode because we are raised to pretty much survive, where most of our parents been surviving, so that's all they know, so they teach us how to survive, and we're walk through our life not knowing that we're experiencing life at the bare minimum, bare minimum.
And you're absolutely correct. We're experiencing life at a bare minimum. And as you mentioned, we've been conditioned from the time we're little girls. Some of us grew up in an environment where you cannot be seen or heard, right? Some of us grew up in an environment where you were taught that your love comes from other people's validation. So the more you do for others is the only way you get love. And then what happened is, as women, we grow into girls, we grow into young ladies, but we're not even realizing that in the process, we're neglecting our own needs to satisfy everybody else's needs. And that's why you find a lot of women are in a perpetual state of anxiety and depression, not feeling worthy really, and not really having a purpose in what they're meant to do in life, because we've been conditioned that the only way we can be seen, heard, or loved is by doing for others. We get validation from other people. And the truth of the matter is, you can only love and forgive anybody to the same extent that you love and forgive somebody else. So we've been trained to love everybody else, but then at the same time, we've been trained to disown ourselves.
Yep. Or feel guilty about loving ourselves.
Yes.
And the way we're conditioned that if we decide to take a step back, we feel shame and guilt that we want to do that. Like, it doesn't feel comfortable. It doesn't feel like it's something that we're supposed to do. And so we don't do it because that feeling of guilt and shame, it hurts. So like, I don't want to feel it. So I'd rather not take care of me and love on me because of that feeling. So we'll push away and just keep on serving, be at service to everyone but ourselves.
Yes. And we stay at service and we continue to do that. And like you say, it's the guilt, at shame. And also what I found out during my journey was, by doing so, we were actually running away from our own wounds, right? We're running away from our own trauma. We're running away from dealing with ourselves, because let me pour into other people. Let me try to fix everybody else. Let me make sure everybody else is okay, right? And it's during that process where the more you do that, I call it self-betrayal. And we get so angry. You find a lot of women who are very resentful, and we're like, well, this person didn't let me do this. Well, my family did this. And you know what? That is true. But it also, we live a life of self betrayal because we've never been taught how to love ourselves enough so we don't betray ourselves. So the resentment, the anger is really towards ourselves more than anybody else. So it's really about helping and empowering women to face the truth of where they're at. And it's okay. It's okay to be where you're at, but you have to begin that journey. It's that self-healing journey to get to know who you are to the core of your being. You know, I always say that just like the way society says you have to be a strong woman, especially for African and for Black women in
Well,
general, right? We've been
yes.
sold the story, and I call it a story now because I used to wear that cape with pride.
Me too. Miss Independent Woman, I got this. I don't need nobody
Yes,
help. I can handle this. I can carry this.
yes,
Everything is mine. When I say I was this powerful superwoman around my house,
yeah,
at work, at home, and
yeah,
in the world to my friends, I was that person.
yeah. And that person,
It's,
they said, you're strong, you're so powerful.
well, she
But in,
exhausted.
but in actual reality, no,
She's
tired,
exhausted,
broken,
tired. She's hurt.
exhausted, hurting, and
Hmm.
we don't ask for help because how do you ask for help when you're struggling? And every time you're around people, they call you strong, right?
Hmm.
They see your strength through your struggle, you
Hmm.
know, and that's why I had to really stop subscribing to the strong women, quote unquote, that
Hmm.
society is giving us. I understand that I'm a strong woman. I bring life into this world. And even if I don't bring life into this world, women nurture other human beings, right? You don't have to give birth to really be classified like, okay, you're a woman who brings life into this world. You have a lot of women who nurture other people, and that takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of strength, and it takes a lot of tenacity. That is the strength that I would love for women to tap into, that God given strength or whoever you subscribe to, not the strength that society places on us. That strength has so many expectations, we can't keep up, and it leaves us broken. And
Yes.
we end up living this life where we're just masking every day, masking and try to become somebody that does not exist when we're hurting inside.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it does. And a little bit people know that the strength, the strong, you can still wear that badge, but that strong woman is that woman that asks for help. You're strong when you ask
Yes.
for help. You're strong when you
Yes.
let people know like what you're doing is hurting me. You're stronger when you're
Yes.
vulnerable. So that strong woman is still exists in us, but in the opposite
The
way.
strong, right. And the strong woman will always exist in us.
Yeah,
Nobody even
yeah,
needs to tell us, right?
yeah,
That's I mean, it's women, all the things that we do, right? So I know I'm
yeah.
strong, but I
Sure.
don't have to carry this cape that has these expectations that are not realistic because society will measure the strength of a man by how much weight they can carry, but they measure the strength of a woman by how much pain
Thank
you
you.
endure. So when I tell people that I'm going through, when people see me getting abused, when people see me suffering, when people see me being a single mom, when people see me or any other women just going through life and doing it, they're like, oh my God, you are so strong. I don't have a choice but to be strong, but I'm actually really weak right now.
Yeah.
You know?
I tell people all the time, like, yeah, they're like, you got it. Like, go through trials, and they be like,
Yeah.
oh, I know you got it. Like, even though you know that I will find my way out, does not
Yeah.
do an excuse to just let me figure it out by myself. Like, I didn't come to your rescue. I didn't help you because I knew I watch you always find your way out. I have no other choice but to find my way out. I don't.
Yes.
I can't sit here and cry and soak in the trauma or the situations that's going on. I have to find my way out. I'm
Yeah.
just not sitting on this earth by myself. I brought kids into this earth, so I can't just sit here and soak. I can't
Yes.
sit here and think that the life is going to figure out itself. I have
Hmm.
to because I have
Hmm.
nobody else willing to help me do it. And
Yes.
when people realize, like, that's just anybody, just not women, just anybody, we have to figure it out. We cannot just sit here and just let the world figure it out and hopefully it'll just come together. We have to work towards figuring out our life and our issues. But
Hmm.
having a support system would
Yes.
help us get there so much faster without us breaking ourselves even more than where we were. Like
Mm-hmm.
every time we push ourselves through a situation by ourselves without the support and the guidance that we need from our family and our support system, pull us further away from who we are.
It does, because you're in survival mode,
Yeah.
right? And you know what happens in survival mode? When you're in survival mode, your emotions are suppressed. And
Yeah.
when your emotions are suppressed, you're not present. When your emotions are suppressed, you're not feeling. When your emotions are suppressed, all the illnesses and sicknesses that you feel is because of that suppression. So you stay in it and you live in it, and it just becomes worse and worse and worse. And we don't get any better. And I totally agree with you. It's all about community. It's all about support. And I feel that if more women could tell their stories and share their stories, it would give other women permission to say, hey, me too, I'm hurting. Where can I go to get help? It's okay to get help, right? God is the number one in my life, but I trust and believe in God, but I also did get therapy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
So it's okay. It's okay to get help. So it's important for us to have these conversations, to be able to give other women permission, because the reason why most women don't speak is because of shame. Just like me, when I do my talks and I talk to women, I tell them that for a while, shame was my middle name. I
yeah.
was ashamed of who I am,
Mm-hmm.
ashamed of everything about myself. So then what that did was it made me put energy into creating somebody that I'm not, showing up as who I was not, right? And it never felt right because that was not me. But it was until when I had to be honest with myself and say, look, this is where I'm at, and it's okay.
It's
It's
okay.
okay. It's okay that I'm here. It's okay that I've experienced all these things. And they say things happen for you. And to you, it takes us a while to realize that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And then it's okay to really not be okay. Then from that space, you start gaining that awareness.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's awareness, and it goes back to the like they say, take a village to raise a family, and
Mhm.
because you're adult doesn't mean that you no longer need your village.
Exactly.
We
We'll always need our village until the day
always
we
need our
die.
village. So
And it's,
people think that once you
yeah,
hit a certain age, that now it's all your responsibility. No, your village got to come with you
no,
to your last days. We
yeah,
God built us for community, built us
yes,
relationships, and that's
yes,
what people don't realize. Purpose in life is relationships. Our goal is to keep reproducing and create
yes,
relationship, create love through other people. Our purpose, it seemed like our purpose, like just like we're here to make sure we find our purpose, but little do we know our purpose is for the people around us, not
yes,
for us. So we feel like when
yes.
you're not living in purpose,
You're
you're
not
hurting
serving.
yourself because you're not helping your community.
Yes. And
And
you're not helping. And when you're not living in service, it's not necessarily just not helping your community, because I do believe you have to help yourself
yourself,
first.
yeah, exactly.
Right. So then you begin to help your community. I do believe, just as you say, God created us. We all have to be in community. We all need each other. I believe every human being was created with a gift. Every human being has a purpose. And that's why proximity is power. The people that you're around, the environment that you're in will help you excel. Those environments, even if you're not excelling and you're going through a process, a healing process, you have to be aware to be in environments that will create that space for you to heal. But all those things don't start coming together till you look at yourself in the mirror and say, this is who I am now. This is what I've been through. It doesn't look good. It doesn't sound good. It does not feel good. But I have the power to make a change. And it's one step at a time. One step. The day you say, I want to make a change, that's the first step that you're taking. And that is huge because it's awareness.
I agree. I always start with awareness. Like that's what got me started with my healing journey. Like it's a lot was going on, and I was like, what is this? Like I had to sit down with myself and do a lot of self
Yeah.
reflection. Like, why am
Yes.
I feeling like this? What's going on with me? Like I thought my biggest thing when I started my healing journey was that my awareness, I lack awareness because my mind is, I'm no longer in that situation, so that situation should no longer be affecting me. But little did I
Mm-hmm.
know that situation was inside of me, though, even though I wasn't physically in that situation anymore. And it was still in my everyday, the way I talked, the way I walked, the way I presented
Mm-hmm.
myself, the way I
Mm-hmm.
interacted with my kids
Mm-hmm.
was affected by what I went through, not knowing that. Because I'm
Mm-hmm.
thinking I'm not with my parents somewhere, I'm not in that relationship no more, I'm not in that abusive relationship no more. So I should be fine. My life
Mm-hmm.
should go smoothly, but it didn't. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, and I couldn't understand why. And when I sat with myself and I realized that I was carrying that abusive relationship with me, the way I
Mm-hmm.
interact with my kids, the way I parented my kids, the way I interact with people in work, my lack of trust for people was based
Yes.
on what I experienced. And I was
Yeah.
carrying that with me every day until I realized that and started to shift my communication, the way I interact with my kids, the way I parent, the way I do my business, the way I do
Mm-hmm.
anything.
Yeah.
When I realized, oh, I'm still hurt. I'm still trauma.
Yeah.
I'm still living in this space of fight, flight, and freeze.
Yeah.
I was still
Yeah.
living there.
Yeah. And that's
And
not and that's a space where I always say in life, I never want to live in defense. I always want to be in offense, right?
yeah,
And you even mentioned about how you had moved on and you're thinking that you're doing well, but you're like, I'm still thinking this way. And this is big. This is big. And this is the reason why I say our minds are very powerful, right? It's about our thoughts, the way we think, it creates our life. Your mind can never comprehend what your heart knows.
mm-hmm.
And that is why when I work with my clients and I work with people, we tap in. We tap into your heart, your soul. It has all the answers. It knows the truth of everything. Our mind is sharp. Our mind is great. Our thoughts create our life, all that stuff, right? It's so true. But then our mind, it also protects us, right? So there are some things that the heart does that the mind will never comprehend. And that's why, even as when people talk about the spiritual journey, when we talk about healing, it always starts from the inside because everything that we're experiencing, that we're thinking, that we're doing, it's inside of us, whether it is our trauma, things that we need to excavate, things that we need to heal, all that stuff it's the inside of us. And that's why you will find that when you start doing the inner work, healing, that's when transformation starts. Because sometimes you may be feeling a certain way and your mind is like, no, you're good.
yeah,
Just say I'm good. So that toxic positivity, right? Just say I'm
yeah,
good because everybody's telling you be good. It's okay. And it's true. You will get through it. It is okay because in everything we go through, there's a season. We have seasons for everything. But the truth is, your heart knows the truth.
yeah,
Your heart is the truth of who you are. Just like my business, Loud Whisper, I tell people that's where God speaks the loudest to me. You know, that people call it the gut feeling, the intuition, but that still voice inside of you. That's, if you sit still enough, it will help you start on the journey. So connect to your heart. I always tell people I lead with my heart. Do your best to connect to your heart. Do your best to be still. It gets uncomfortable because when we sit still and connect to our heart, is when all the wounds start coming up, all those different things start coming up, and nobody likes feeling uncomfortable.
yeah.
So people don't want to do it. Yeah.
Exactly. I always tell people, like, people always like, oh, I don't want to feel those negative emotions. I don't want to feel anger, sadness, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like, and I always tell people it's not a such thing as positive or negative emotions. They're emotions.
No.
And each one has a goal and a
Yes.
purpose. And
Yes.
you have those emotions. Your job is to explore them. Don't push them away because you don't want to feel them. You have to explore them and see
Yeah.
why they're showing up. What are
Mm-hmm.
they communicate with you? And what do you need to fix so that you don't have to sit in that emotion? Each emotion has a purpose, and the goal is to communicate something to you. Like you said, it's your heart. Your heart is trying to communicate with your brain, but you're the person in between that's blocking it. You have
Yeah.
to be
Yeah.
the connector so that your brain
Mm-hmm.
can understand why your heart is feeling this way.
Yes. And your emotions, that's a feeling.
Mm-hmm,
So sometimes even when you're angry, believe it or not, there is healthy anger
mm-hmm.
because it's a feeling,
It's a feeling.
right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. So there is healthy anger. There is healthy sadness. There is healthy grief. I mean, you can't You lose somebody, you're going to grieve. You can't tell somebody, well, just get over it. No.
Exactly.
Yeah. So all those emotions are feelings and we are created to feel. So it's important when you find yourself in that space, just sit in it for a second, feel it, let it come through you, and then ask yourself, how am I feeling?
Mm-hmm. And another thing is a lack of emotions. Like, are you not experiencing these emotions? Like, you need to tap into yourself and ask yourself, why am I not angry that this happened to me? Why am I not feeling this way towards someone that I feel like I'm supposed to love this person, I'm supposed to care genuinely about this person? Why am I not connecting with this person? You know what I'm saying? Like, what is the lack of emotions? Why don't I have these connections? And a lot of people don't realize, because they're trauma, they can block emotions too.
Yes.
They're not trying to feel. They just went numb. And now you have to explore why you have these lack of emotions also.
And we have the lack of emotions too. And we always focus on why we have lack of emotions for everybody else. You have the lack of emotion because you have the lack of emotion for yourself first. Because you can't give what you don't have. Yeah, and that's something I learned, because I would stand on the mountaintop and be like, I love my family to death, and I really do. I'll do anything. But when I started healing, that love came from a totally different space. The parenting came from a totally different space. Me being a wife came from a totally different space, because everything started becoming intentional, right? And what's being intentional? Really being intentional, it's a big word. People use it around, but intentionality is really just thinking about what you're doing and why you're doing it, and getting your thoughts to go into that action. So as you're doing the action, you're okay with yourself because you intentionally doing it, instead of just us going on this hamster wheel where we ignore emotions. We say yes to everything. We say no when we're supposed to say yes. We say yes when we're supposed to say no. And we're just moving. And that comes from not knowing ourselves. What do you value? What matters to you? You know, how do you show up in life when you don't know these core things? Like, who are you?
That's true. That's exactly, that's how I move now. Yeah, that's how I move now, especially when it comes to my kids and parenting. I just had a discussion the other day when I said, there was like, your parenting's a little odd. I'm like, I get it. A lot of people don't agree with the way I'm raising my kids now. But I said, at this point, like, my kids have a lot of freedom when it comes to speaking and exploring and expressing themselves. And I didn't have that as a kid. I was like, well, right now I'm just giving my kids an opportunity to express themselves and to be free. I didn't have that option. So I don't want to restrict them or put my kids down a line or traumatize them the way that I've been traumatized. Like, yes, give our kids a little more freedom than we had. That a lot of people see that freedom as disrespect. And I'm like, it's not disrespect. We are all humans. So we all have a say-so in how we are treated and how people speak to us. And a lot of people don't understand that because they're still living in their trauma. And I'm okay with my kids asking me why. A lot of people are not, adults is not okay with the word why. Like, I said, so go do it. And I'm like, they have a say-so in what they do in their life, even though they're just little humans. You know, a lot of people don't understand that. I'm like,
and a lot of people, and as you mentioned, a lot of people won't understand that because of the way they were raised. Like, even me, the way I'm raised, you never ask why, right?
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
coming from
that. I would see myself somewhere on somebody's wall. I'll be like,
right. Like, you never ask why. And as I mentioned earlier, being raised is, even in my culture, just like the way you're saying, in your culture, being raised in Africa, you don't ask why. Are you kidding me? But just like the way you're raising your kids, I've given my kids that measuring stick. I've actually allowed them to be themselves. It took a lot because I was not raised like that. And then sometimes they do take it a little bit too far, right? But
it's perfect. But it's like you live in it, they're like, oh, this is what I'm going to create. And then when it happens, you be like, child.
Ooh, child. Ooh. Right. Exactly. But, you know, the thing about it is that even with my coaching, the reason why I'm able to help my clients evoke their own transformation is really about reflection. It's about the questions that I ask them. It's giving them the opportunity to ask themselves this question. So as you say, if your child asks you why, it's really out of curiosity. So they can know. Now, if they're asking you why and you tell them to do the same thing over and over again and they're asking why, that's one thing. But you're absolutely correct. So if a child says, Why do you want me to move that, mom? There's no need to get upset. Let the child understand why. Because
Exactly.
what that does is that it actually helps them create a person so they can show up in life where they don't have low self-esteem, right? They're curious about life. Their confidence is higher because from childhood, they were given the space to ask why so they can understand why they're doing what they're doing. And that's where that intention comes in.
Up instead of like you said, like we're on autopilot. They're purposely walking through life just in a way of how people told them how to walk. Like this is what you're supposed to
Yeah,
do, how you're supposed to do, and they'll have no say. So like now they have a question like why? I get to ask why. I get to understand why I'm doing what
yeah.
I understand why I'm here and what
Mm-hmm.
my purpose is, and then they can ask themselves why. Like why
Mm-hmm.
am I doing this? Is this something that I really want to do in life? Is this really something that I want to pursue furthermore? You know, I always tell
Yeah.
people like we always look outward. Like you said, we always look outward for the questions of our life and
Mm-hmm.
what we're doing. But little no, all we gotta do is ask ourselves. And we 9 out of 10, even if it's hard to find it and tackle it down, to find
Mm-hmm.
a pinpoint, we know the answers. We already have what we need. We already have the answers. We just have to find them inside of ourselves,
Yes.
ask ourselves.
Yes.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned, right, even our children asking those questions why, we're preparing for the real world.
Mm-hmm.
If you notice, and I'll speak from what I have noticed in being in business for so long, a lot of us African Americans, very few people in sales.
Yeah.
The reason why very few of us are in sales is because we were never given the opportunity to ask why. So we don't have the confidence to show up and just to be able to present ourselves. You cannot be seen or heard. And we fail to realize that that trait, we take it into our relationships, we're taking it to our work. It becomes a part of who we are, whether we see it or not. So it is vital to give our children that opportunity. And these are the things that we have to change so that we're not passing down that trauma. So we're not passing down the same experiences. To give our kids the opportunity to discover. It's really all about discovering. And the more questions they ask, it helps them know who they are. So when they go out there into the world, they're not afraid to ask why when somebody is mistreating them. They're not afraid to ask why when somebody is abusing them. They're not afraid to ask these powerful questions that will help transform their lives because we give them an opportunity to have that curiosity so they can discover who they are, know who they are, and have that self confidence.
Yep. I agree. And another thing I do, I allow them to like challenge. It's hard, I don't know how to explain. Like I allow them to challenge me, if that makes sense. Like as an authority figure, I don't want them to get comfortable with authority telling them what to do and how to do it. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like challenging an authority figure in a respectful way where they got to understand like when a lot of authority figure, what abuse comes from a lot of authority figures, and a lot of people know because I'm the head of something, I get to do something to you that you might not feel comfortable with. And
Mm-hmm.
in
Well,
their
they think that, but it actually comes from weak people, but they think that.
exactly. Hmm. Exactly. So I allow them to kind of challenge authority figures. Like, you don't get to speak to me a certain type of way. You don't get to tell me a certain thing without a certain consent, like a certain thing, like, oh, well, I didn't get consent from my mother. So technically, I cannot move forward in this event, regardless if you're telling me or that we're going to have a discussion with my mom before we move forward with this. And a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people like, hold on. I'm blase. I'm your grandmother. I don't need your mother consent. Like, well, from the conversation I had with my mother, you do need her consent. And until we have that consent, I cannot move forward. You know, like not allowing them to go a certain place, that lets them know, like, well, my mom didn't give me permission to leave here with you. I don't care if you're my grandmother, my aunt, my uncle, whoever. That permission was not granted to me, so I would not move from this space. And they
Mm-hmm.
don't like that challenging. They be like, I swear, but I'm like, it's teaching them how to be safe in this world and not just allowing them to be a victim because of that. I trusted a lot of people that was authority figures in my house that abused me, you know, because
Mm-hmm.
I trusted
Mm-hmm.
them because I thought they were family friends. I thought they were people that had my best interest in heart. And
Mm-hmm.
even though they kind of proved it in the same instant, we really don't know everybody that we're around. They could be family, friends, or
Yeah.
People
And
have
most of the abuse, especially most of the abuse, and this is not just for women, even for men in general, normally happens. It happens from somebody closest to you.
Mm-hmm.
It's always somebody in the vicinity. Yeah.
Yeah, and they don't realize it. And just knowing, just teaching them little aspects of protecting yourself, and just having, when you're not able to be in a place of protection, making sure you have somebody that's there going to protect you, to make sure somebody's looking out for your best interests. And I'm just letting, like, mommy's here regardless of what's going on. If you don't feel comfortable, you make that phone call, like, don't move, don't do nothing until I I pretty much make sure the space is safe so you to move into the space. And then
Yes.
teaching them how to do that in their real life.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you don't feel safe, you can turn around and we could just go back home. You don't have to move forward. It's like with the hugging and the kiss. Like, I really don't want to give nobody a hug today. Then don't. We don't have to hug when you don't want to. You don't have to give anybody kisses because they're older than us or they want to. Like, no. Permission. Ask for permission. I even do the biggest thing with my 6-year-old is her asking permission. Like, she loves to just run up and hug and kiss. But I'm like, you have to ask that person for permission. Like, is it okay if I give you a hug right now? Is it okay if I give you a kiss and stuff like that? Like, it's hard for her, but like respecting herself and respecting other people too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like she like, that's like really a real big boundary. That's like setting boundaries, teaching them how to do for themselves and other people. A lot of us, we don't have boundaries, so that's why we get traumatized and we allow things to interfere with who we are because we just let people in. And they didn't have
because we've never been taught to have boundaries. Like I said, we've actually been conditioned to give up ourselves for love. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you can have healthy boundaries. What I say is, for me, boundaries, the reason why it's important to have boundaries is because boundaries actually show self-love for yourself. Right. And boundaries allow you to create a space for yourself. And honestly, boundaries teach people how to treat you.
Exactly.
So when I tell people about boundaries, I'm not saying don't talk to this one, don't do that. No. You have to know what is important to you. You can't even create those boundaries, to be honest with you, unless you know what your values are, what's important to you, and who you are. Yeah. And you have to know when to say no. You have to know when it does not work for you. You have to be okay with yourself. I talked about self-betrayal. Boundaries and self-betrayal go hand in hand, huge. Somebody asks you to do something, yeah, sure, do it. And deep down inside, you don't want to do it. And you get so upset, you get mad. Then you start getting mad at that person. It's really not that person. You're just angry at yourself because you know what? Then again, you ignored that still voice, that loud whisper inside of you that said, no, not today. You were tired. But because you've been living a life of people pleasing, you're afraid if you don't say no, you will lose the people that love you.
Yes.
You're afraid if you don't say no, nobody's going to want to be around you or nobody's going to do for you. It's actually the opposite.
Yeah.
Yeah. It gets hard in the beginning. People don't understand when you start creating boundaries because they're not used to who you're becoming. They're not used to who they're seeing. But you have to create those healthy boundaries to protect yourself, to show yourself love, and to honestly teach people how to treat you. Because as much as we complain about how other people treat us, they only treat us according to how they see we treat ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I agree. And then another thing when it comes to boundaries is that we think that the boundary is for the other person. It's for us. That when we set a boundary, don't call me after a certain time, and someone call you, you the one that answer the phone. You said don't call. You answer the phone to tell them not to call. Don't answer the phone. It's your job to enforce. It's your job to enforce. And if you answer the phone to tell them, like I said, don't call me after the clock, you the one that violated your boundary. You enforce that boundary by not answering that phone at 8 o'clock. They call, don't answer. You don't answer. And then if someone do violate, you do reinforce it. You let them know, like, okay, I asked you not to do this. Please don't do that. But you don't do it at the time they call at 8 o'clock. The next day you will call them like, hello, I ask you not
Mhm.
to call me after class. I would like for you not to do that again. If you do it, it will be a consequence, and the consequence will be ABC. You know what I'm saying? Like, you
Mhm.
have to have consequences, because if you don't give people consequence for overstepping a boundary, they're gonna think that it's not there. They're gonna think it's invisible.
And another thing about that, right? It's somebody you place a boundary and somebody oversteps the boundary. Then you're like, okay, well, maybe next time. Then they overstep the boundary. So what you do is, I was listening to Yana Vaznat one day, and gosh, she said it so well. So what happens is that you can't keep backing up,
Yeah,
withdrawing the line on the sand,
yeah,
right?
you're making,
Time they
yeah,
did it, so back up, you give them more space, back up, you give them more space, back up. It does not work. When you draw the line in the sand, you draw the line in the sand. And here's the thing: boundaries will actually allow you to have more authentic relationships.
yes,
Yeah. With
yes,
yourself and other people, because now you're understanding each other. You know what the person wants, what they need, what they won't tolerate. And you actually have a more pure and authentic relationship, because you get to understand yourself and to understand other people. But it's really important to create boundaries, especially in this space and this world that we're in, where everything is social, everything is out
yeah,
there, and people just think they can violate one another and all that kind of stuff. We have to create those boundaries.
I totally agree. But
Mhm.
we're coming to the end of this episode. Before
Okay.
we end this episode, is it any advice or tips that you would like to give the listeners before we close out this episode?
Yes, absolutely. I always give, before we close out the episode, the first thing I want to say is that get to know who you are. And when I mean know who you are, I'm not talking about your job. I'm not talking about the roles that you play in life. Get to know who you are to the core of your being. What do you like? What matters to you? You know, look at yourself in the mirror. Tell yourself that you love yourself over and over again, even if you don't believe it in the beginning. You start saying enough, your mind will start believing it, and then you start becoming that. So it's important first for you to know who you are. And number two, you got to believe in something bigger than yourself. Whoever you serve, you have to believe in something bigger than yourself that you can lean on, be accountable to, that will help you move forward. Number three, boundaries. Boundaries is crucial. Boundaries is the way we set up our life. Boundaries is how we show self-love. And because you can't give what you don't have. So make sure you fill your tank up first. The biggest number one thing, each day, find 5 minutes for stillness and be with yourself. I'm telling you, that's the beginning of the journey, when you can sit and be with yourself. Even if your mind is running, just sit still, take deep breaths, and be with yourself. Trust your voice, trust who you are, and live with integrity with yourself. Don't let people take advantage of you. Don't let people abuse you. And ask for help.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be in a situation, okay, that's not good for you. Ask for help. Don't sit at home just drowning in sorrow and pain. Ask for help. Like Brene Brown says, our strength comes from our vulnerability.
Amen. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah.
Totally agree. Totally agree. And just make sure to ask yourself questions. Do a lot of self reflection.
Self-reflection is big. Self-reflection is big. Ask yourself those powerful questions every day. How am I feeling? Simple as that.
Yeah.
How am I feeling today? What is my heart saying
Mm-hmm.
today?
How I'm gonna be intentional today. How I'm gonna walk
Yes.
in purpose, like intentional, like every step. Try to be,
Mhm.
like you said before earlier. Just try to be intentional about
Yeah.
how you show up today. Like how I'm going to show up for me today. What is going to be my steps, even if it's one
Yeah.
step a day. Like I'm going to show up for me in this one area of my life by doing this, and just honor it.
And just honor it. And it's always one step at a time. Don't listen to
Yep.
people who think they got from 0 to 1,000. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
Everything that God created goes through a process. And when I mean everything God created goes through the process. And it's during that process, there are seasons. So you're going to have your seasons of rain, thunder, storm, sun, which is joy. We see the trees, right? The leaves fall off in a certain season and the trees are bare. They're going through the storms and all that. When the next season comes, you know what we say? Oh, that tree is tall.
Yeah,
It's grown.
it's growing.
Yeah, it's grown and now you see the beautiful leaves. Yeah. So it's just like us. Everything that God created, everything goes through a process. So just trust the process, have faith. You don't have to do it alone. Ask for help, find time for stillness, listen to your voice. The thing that we call that gut feeling, when you feel it, stop, take 3 breaths before you make a decision, before you answer a question, and you will see how much you'll start trusting yourself.
Amen to that. Now, can you tell the listeners where they can reach you at and your social media handles?
Absolutely. You can reach me on all the social media handles, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Facebook, it's Isabel Drawn. Instagram is Isabel Drawn too. Everything is Isabel Drawn. My website is isabeldrawn.com. So you can go on there and check it out and see what I do. And if you have any questions, I'd like to have a conversation with you. But yeah, I'm on all handles. Twitter too. I'm Isabel Drawn, and my business is called Loud Whisperer.
Well, thank you for being a guest today, and I really
You're very
appreciate the
welcome.
conversation. It was very powerful, and I'm 100% sure the listeners are going to need this, and this is gonna help shift their healing process.
Yes, yes, yes. It's time to heal. It's
It
time.
definitely is.
Yeah, it's time to heal. It's time.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
time for it to have a safe space for healing. It's time for us to know that we're not the only
Yes.
people going through this process. We're not alone in this process, and that
No.
we have spaces that it's okay to talk about these things without feeling judged or feeling that guilt and shame and stuff like that. So I think that this conversation is really needed, and hopefully it'll touch the people that it needs to touch.
I hope so too.
Yeah.
I hope so. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. Hopefully we can do this again sometime, but thank you so much.
You're welcome. Oh, you didn't tell them you said you had a podcast too,
I
right?
do have a podcast.
Yeah,
Thank you for mentioning
yeah,
that. I
yeah.
do
I
have
definitely
a
want to go
podcast
listen
that
to
I'd
that.
like to have you on too.
Yeah.
I do have a podcast. You can find it on Spotify, Apple. It's called Loud Whisper. And yeah, so go check it out.
Well, that's it for this episode of Sisters Love Podcast. But before we end, I want to invite you to our new support group. This group is exclusive for the podcast listeners. This is the perfect place for women to come together, share their experience, ask questions, get access to exclusive resources. In this group, you can meet those amazing podcast guests, get free resources, and find support. This is a judge-free zone, so you never have to worry about feeling unheard or alone again. To join the group, all you have to do is sign up for our mailing list, and once you sign up, you'll get full access to the support group. So, until next time, signing off, your sister through love. Love you.